Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Dunn. This is part 2 of our screencast on the parabola. In the first screencast, we focused on the equations and graphs of parabolas where the vertex was at the origin or the vertex was at 0, 0. You'll remember that those equations, if the parabola is facing up or down, is x squared equals 4py. And when the parabola was facing right or facing left, the equation was y squared equals 4px. And we went through a couple examples, two where we found the vertex, the directrix, and the focus of the parabola given the equations, and one where we actually were given the focus and the vertex, and we came up with the equation. What we're going to be doing in this screencast is focusing on parabolas where the vertex is not the origin. So the vertex could be anywhere on our x and y coordinate system. So when the vertex is shifted left or right, remember, that's changing the x value. And we did something similar to this when we talked about the standard equation of a quadratic function. We used the variables h and k. And we're going to go back to those h and k's to talk about the vertex of our parabola here. So h is going to be that translation left or right, and k is going to be the translation up or down. So if you think about it, before we had x squared equals 4py, but now the equation is x minus h squared equals 4p times y minus k. So the only difference in these equations is the h and the k. Do you see that? And when the equation, or the parabola, is facing left or right, before, when the vertex was the origin, we had y squared equals 4px. That's because, remember, h and k were 0. But now, if h and k are not 0, our equation is y minus k squared equals 4px minus h. Okay, so here we go. Let's look at an example. So for the parabola x squared plus 6x plus 4y plus 5 equals 0, we're asked to find the vertex, the focus, and the directrix, and then draw the graph. Well, this equation doesn't look anything like what we had on the previous screen. What I do notice is that the squared term is x. So I know, since the squared term is x, I need to write my equation in this form. X minus h squared equals 4p times y minus k. And how I'm going to do that is by completing the square. That's why we learned this a couple chapters ago. Okay, so to complete the square, I'm going to get the x terms on the left and everything else on the right. So if there's a y term and a constant, I move to the right. So I subtracted 4y and I subtracted 5. And now I'm going to complete the square here. To complete the square, I'm going to add something to both the left and the right side of this equation. That thing I'm going to add is half of 6 squared. So that means I have to add 9 to both sides of the equation. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. Now, if I factor the left side, I get x plus 3 squared. And on the right, I just added negative 5 and positive 9. And I'm still not in this form because I have to get the coefficient of y to be a positive 1. So I'm going to have to divide by a negative 4. So x plus 3 squared is equal to negative 4 times y minus 1. Now from here, I know what h and k is, and I know p. So h is negative 3. That comes from right here. H is negative 3. It's the opposite of this. K is the opposite of this, so it's positive 1. And P is negative 1. Remember, 4P is negative 4, which means P has to be negative 1. Since P is negative 1 and we have an x squared, I know my parabola is opening downward. Do you understand that? The P is negative and it's an x squared. So because it's an x squared, it's facing up or down. Because P is negative, it's facing down. Now, remember this from the previous screen, from that definition of the parabola in standard form. This is the guideline that helps me find the vertex, the focus, and the directrix. The vertex is HK. Well, H is negative 3 and K is 1, so the vertex is negative 3, 1. The focus is H, so it's negative 3, and then K plus P, which means it's going to be 1 plus negative 1. So the focus is negative 3, 0. Okay, the H part stays the same, but the K part, because remember we're moving up, is negative 3, 0. Actually, I'm sorry, we were moving down. So we're moving down 1, so it's negative 3, 0. The directrix is K minus P. Well, K is 1. 1 minus negative 1 is negative 2, or positive 2, sorry. So let me say that again. Remember, the directrix is K minus P. So it should be 1 minus negative 1. And 1 minus negative 1 is a positive 2. So the directrix is y equals 2. Draw your directrix, draw your focus, draw your vertex, and then draw your parabola. And this is what it will look like. Okay, let's do another example. For the parabola y squared minus y minus x plus 6 equals 0, we want to find the vertex, the focus, and the directrix, and draw the graph. First, I notice it's a y squared. That tells me that my equation is going to be y minus k squared equals 4p times x minus h. I'll complete the square. So I put y squared minus y on one side. I added x and subtracted 6 to the other. What should I add to the left and the right side of the equation? Half of 1 squared. Half of 1 squared is 1/2, and 1/2 squared is 1/4. So I'm going to add 1/4 to both sides of the equation. So I get y minus 1/2 squared is equal to x minus 23/4. Now, what's h, what's k, and what's p? Well, h is 23/4. K is going to be 1/2. You see that here? So x minus 23/4, so 23/4 is h. And the opposite of negative 1/2 is positive 1/2. That's K. And since 4P is equal to 1, that means that P has to be equal to 1/4. Do you see where I'm getting the 1? That's the coefficient of x. Since that coefficient of x is 1, that's what 4P is equal to. So P has to be equal to 1/4. Now, here we have the guidelines that helps us find the vertex, the focus, and the directrix for a y squared type of equation. Now, is P positive or negative? It's positive. What does that mean? Which direction is the parabola going to be opening? So it's positive. That means it's either up or to the right. And since it's y squared, it's to the right. I hope you're catching on to that. You always want to have a visual of what this parabola looks like. It's facing to the right. That we knew that because it was a y squared. Left or right if it's y squared, to the right if p is positive. Okay, now the vertex. The vertex is h comma k. So it's 23/4, 1/2. The focus. The focus is take the h value and add p. Well, h is 23/4, and 23/4 plus 1/4 is 24/4, which is the same as 6. So the focus is at 6 1/2. The directrix is x is equal to h minus p. Well, h is 23/4, and 23/4 minus 1/4 is 22/4. So x equals 22/4 is the value of the directrix. And here's your graph. Okay, last question, or last example. In the last example, we want to find an equation of a parabola with the given conditions. The focus is 3, 2, and the directrix is x equals -4. Even though I'm not asked for the graph, I'm starting with a graph. I strongly encourage you to do this. Please, people, draw the graph. If you see it on a graph, even if you're just doing it rough with a scratch paper, you got to see what's happening. And if you see it, it'll make so much more sense. So I'm going to draw the focus, which is at 3, 2. I'm going to draw the directrix, which is at x is equal to -4. Now, the reason why this picture is so important is because our vertex is halfway between the directrix and the focus. So our vertex is right about here. It's halfway. That's our vertex. So what is that distance? Well, the distance, you can count the tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that distance is 7. And 7 is what twice p is equal to. So 7 divided by 2 is what that distance is. That's what p is equal to. So p is equal to 7/2. So to find the vertex, we're going to go from the focus 3.5 units to the left. 3.5 units to the left. So the h value is going to be 3 minus 7/2. The k value doesn't change. We're still the same height, right? So h is going to be -1/2, and k is still 2. That's all I need to put it in the equation. I know I have a y-squared equation, right? So we know this is a y-squared equation, so it's got to be y minus k squared equals 4 times p times x minus h. So substitute k and h and p into this equation. And when you substitute those values, you get y minus 2 squared is equal to 14 times x plus 1/2. It's a lot of information. Good luck. Email me with your questions. Be specific with your questions. If you just say, I don't understand this, I'm not going to be able to help you. Show me your work. Show me what you think is right, and then I'll be able to help you and guide you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.